right. Nathan, how you doing today?
Stupendous.
Awesome.
Yourself?
I'm doing good, and I'm really excited about this quote and this artist.
I'm excited about your haircut. Let's talk about your haircut
Thanks.
first.
Yeah.
You look fantastic.
Let's see. I went from Jesus to a clean cut individual overnight. So yeah, I'm excited. Looking clean, ready for my studio selfies. I'm ready for Marilyn Minter to take some shots of my face.
I can't wait
close
to check out your Instagram later this week. Just a lot of these.
Oh yeah, there'll be a lot of studio selfies because that's what we do as artists, right? That's part of the game.
Well, now it's going to be real clear what's old footage and what's new footage.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have to represent it with a year.
That's right. Yep.
No throwback Thursdays. You'll just be able to recognize it.
Pre and post haircut. All right. Yep. Anyway.
Well, welcome to Just Make Art. Really excited about today and our quotes, a fabulous female artist, Marilyn Minter. So excited to discuss not only her so that you can go and research her work and her life as an artist. Fabulous, fabulous interviews from YouTube with Marilyn. One, just a little trophy banner. I shared a quote of Marilyn's on Instagram. This is probably a month ago, and tagged her in it, and she reshared it. So that's always one of those things when one of your favorite artists, reshares something that you put up. So I had to share that. You want to jump us into the quote, Nathan?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a little bit longer one, and we'll certainly reread it as we go and kind of break it down. But here it is. So Marilyn said, "Don't disregard your gifts. The art world is going to challenge you enough. Don't make it any harder on yourself. Stick with your strengths. If something comes easily to you, don't dismiss it. Explore and expand on it, rather than trying to force it into the prevailing zeitgeist. Just because something seems easy or natural to you doesn't mean it's weak. Listen to your inner voice."
Whew. Yeah.
Lots there to unpack.
This is a great one too, because it comes from an interview she did with an article I read a few years ago on artists telling their former selves advice from what they've learned as they've prevailed through their art term. And, Marilyn herself, she's born in 1948. She's an American visual artist and is mostly known for her sensual paintings and photographs that are done in photorealistic style. It really blurs the line between fine art and commercial art. And she's also a fabulous educator. She teaches in the MFA department at SVA, School of Visual Arts in New York. She graduated from the University of Florida and has an MFA in painting from Syracuse. And I love that she still develops film. She takes digital manipulation and then she uses conventional darkroom practices to develop. And she doesn't crop or digitally manipulate her photos. And her paintings are made by combining the negatives in Photoshop to make a whole new image. And then she uses enamel paint on aluminum through layering the photos to create her artwork. And most people don't know this, Nathan, but she is the first artist to advertise an artist exhibition on late night TV in 1990.
David Letterman, right?
David Letterman show, pulling out ads through the gallery's advertising budget to buy 30-second slots. She is a resident badass in art history and has shown. She had the Guggenheim Fellowship for Fine Arts in 98. She's shown at San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, Contemporary Arts Museum, Houston, Brooklyn Museum, and the list just goes on and on and on. And you can see her work in lots of places today. So if you want to see her work, just search what museum has pieces and go out and check her out.
Yeah, it's wild. I was watching one interview where she talked about her process a little bit, and it's not just, when you say multiple images, we're talking like 80 different images, right? To kind of, Frankenstein together what ends up being the end results. Pretty wild. Yeah. I like this quote a lot. I think there's a lot to really unpack and think about it. One of the questions I wanted to kind of start with, like the first time I read this, or actually maybe the second or third time, one of the thoughts I had was just kind of wondering, like, other than forcing something into the prevailing zeitgeist, what else might cause somebody to disregard their gifts?
Yeah.
And here's why that's interesting to me is it seems to me, and I've just got an n equals 1, sample size, but it seems to me that it's one of the most natural things to lean into your strengths, either consciously or subconsciously. We're gonna go to what has worked before. But the more I thought about it, I think, and again, this is maybe just true for me, but I think that if there's any resistance to leaning into what works or really expanding on those natural gifts, it's because they come easy.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to take them for granted. We tend to value things in general that we have to work for, that we give up more to get. And so these natural gifts that we've been sort of blessed with from the start, I don't know if that's it. That's the thought that I had, but I was curious if you had any theory on, just in terms of setting up the problem, that this idea or this advice is attempting to address. What else do you think might keep somebody from, just leaning into their strengths?
Like you said from that quote, just because something seems easy or natural to you doesn't mean that it's weak. And I think that there are times when, we're in the studio and we're working on stuff and we're just rolling, and it just is really easy for us to create in certain forms or certain ways. And I think there is a mindset of, oh man, it should be harder than that. Or that wasn't difficult enough for me. So I need to go ahead and do something totally different and force the issue because I went too fast, or I didn't take enough time, because those things might have been easy or quicker to do than things you don't know. And I think there is a trap that's easy to fall into, to go, oh, I need to do so much more because that was too easy, or I need to, and I've seen this over and over with artists. How can it be strong if it didn't take me that long? I'm not a fast painter. I'm not a fast creator. Is that wrong? I get that question a lot. Is that bad? Like, well, why would that be bad? Who's going to know how long?
They're asking if it's bad that you are, or bad that you aren't.
They're asking, like, is it bad that I work so fast? Is it bad that I'm not spending a month on a painting or, half a year on a sculpture? Because we know those stories, of like the person spent 10 years creating this piece out of cement and oil paint, and it's 10 feet thick. And you know what I mean? They spent all this time on this piece. And so artists all over the world ask me, is it wrong that I paint so fast? Or should I be doing more? I think what she's saying in this, just because it's easy or natural doesn't mean it's weak. That's part of what you're great at. So keep doing that. Listen to that inner voice and just keep channeling it. Yeah,
that's a really good point. I think, when you said that, I've definitely had that feeling. This was supposed to be harder because, for me, oftentimes it is maybe not harder, but a lot more involved, a lot more, uncertainty over the age old question of, is this finished yet? Or, what else does it need, et cetera. And so I think for the occurrences where it does just sort of come together, and you come back the next day, you come back the next week, and you're like, oh, this actually is done. There's definitely that sense of like, oh, it doesn't feel as, involved, or that it required as much to complete as it did. And I'm just speaking about individual pieces, but I think it applies, on a more macro level as well.
Yeah. And I mean, just because it's easy for you or harder for you, that doesn't have anything to do with strong or weak in the work. Good or bad, any of those things. Right. Like if we have techniques that are really easy for us that we've in a sense mastered, then we should always return to those within our work and bring them in. Just because we're learning and growing over time as an artist, there's certain techniques and things that are our strengths, and we should always go to those because that is our voice. That is who we are as the artist coming out in our work. And I love how she states that the art world is going to challenge you enough, so don't make it harder on yourself. Stick with your strengths. I mean, the art world's so hard, so difficult. It's going to challenge every little bit of your being and your soul if you want to play in it. So don't make it harder on yourself. Don't force things. Don't try to do things that are so difficult that you can't create strong work at it. Stick with your strengths. Continue to push and experience and do those things. But I just love, like, don't disregard those gifts. Don't.
A conversation I know you've had with a lot of your mentees is around looking at a lot of art.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But also avoiding following trends or just, falling into what seems to be, hot or popular, right? And those two things may or may not always go together, right? Like there's a natural, I think, tendency to look at, what we like, but then also look at what's popular, what the prevailing thing might be. And in this particular quote, that's the biggest, obstacle, that she's identifying is to avoid that. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but there is certainly a middle ground. But how do you look at a lot of art? How do you consume, which you and I are both massive fans of and see the benefit of, but how do you prevent what is hot and happening from seeping into your work?
I think number one is don't let the zeitgeist influence you. Number one, it's easy for somebody to fall into the trap of everybody's doing that, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. Well, already that's taking you away from your gifts and what you're strong at, because you're trying to recreate what somebody else is doing in the moment. And so it's one of those tough things. Like, you want to see what's hot. You want to know what's going on. Does that mean you're going to fit into it? No, because what's hot now is not going to be hot tomorrow. Like everything is. There are certain things that are long lasting, but most things in art quickly changing and adapting, right? The art world may go really figurative, abstract figurative for a moment, which is really hot right now in a lot of galleries. You see a lot of, kind of abstract figurative pieces, Basquiat-ish type pieces, neo-expressionist type movements, and things that are kind of re-entering in ways that, should they be? I don't know, but they are. And so it's like, does that mean that to tomorrow or next month or next year it's going to be the same? No, it may go back to conceptual and really minimalistic things. Like, there's an ebb and a flow. And I think she's saying, if you try to force yourself into that, you're going to lose yourself and lose your voice. But also you're taking that time away from that exploring and expanding that she talks about too. She says explore and expand on it rather than trying to force it. And I mean, you look at her, somebody who, she's born in 48. So when she went to school and got her MFA in painting, she was probably doing photography, right? And this whole process of learning how to do the things she's done has taken a long time to really master this process, and using the enamel and the aluminum, and then going through with fingers and moving that enamel on the aluminum at the end to kind of create texture and things within it. They manipulate that enamel on her photographs and on her images. So all of these things are things that she was good at, that she was gifted at, and she continued to build on them and explore to get the work that she has today. Right? It would have been easy for her to go, Warhol's hot right now. I just graduated in my MFA from Syracuse, and Warhol's the hottest thing. I'm going to do prints with my photographs and you know what I mean? Then fit into what's hot in the moment, pop art. And she does have pop within her work. There is a lot of pop throughout the things that she does. And it's probably because the time when she was really growing as an artist was during that time that was hot in New York City as well. So, but she didn't disregard the gifts, and she kept going with photo manipulation and these things and using the things she was great at, conventional photography, darkroom processes, all those things. And she still uses it today.
Well, that aspect of the quote, or that portion of it, exploring and expanding on it, I think is a really important thing to think about and talk about. I think, it's normal, it's natural to, lean on what's already worked, and just in terms of natural, or whether we're talking about art or just, whatever has worked in life. I think that it's an easy trap to fall into, to just sort of stick with that at the base sort of natural gift level. I think it's probably less common to really take that next critical step of exploring and expanding on it, because that has, and bringing it back to the artistic practice, that has, I would argue, a limitless well of ideas and inspiration and potential to continue to go wherever it might. So I think the point that I'm trying to make is, natural abilities still need to be developed. They need to be fed. They need to be, nurtured, right? If we don't spend time with them, if we don't, find ways to continue to, I love that word, expand, they're going to get stagnant, and it's quite possible that the work may also, right? If we just do, what comes naturally without exploring and expanding, I think that's something to be aware of it. I think it's a very real possibility that it could sort of just kind of stay pat. And at that point, then you're just doing the thing that came natural in the first place, as opposed to, chasing curiosity and seeing where it leads.
For sure. Well, and I'm constantly exploring and expanding on things that I feel are strong in my work, and that others in the art world have also backed that up by saying these are the strong pieces and things. I've been playing a lot with monotype printing using cardboard over the last 2 years. I've had some bodies of work that I've only done that, and then I have bodies of work where I've mixed the two, and I've really been playing with. So I love painting with my hands. I love, obviously mark making and different expressionist things with paint and texture. So now I'm going back and I'm exploring and expanding on all those things that are my strengths and combining them together. How can they grow? How can I create texture doing mono type stuff? If I put a whole lot of paint on there and use the cardboard to press it down, what stays and what goes, what constructs, what deconstructs as I remove, and then going in with my hands and then putting the cardboard down. So I'm doing all this exploring and things that I feel are really our strengths within my work, and that also come easy to me as well. Because if we're always trying to force the issue and do things that are difficult, it's going to take us a long ass time to make a whole bunch of work,
For sure.
And so constantly trying to explore and expand on the things I'm strong with. How can I make more marks the way that I do using different types of technique and different types of materials and tools and things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the exploration is. I'm good at this. What else can I do to create this way?
What do you think, what have you identified as your just natural strengths and abilities?
Gosh, I think telling stories in the work, number one, just the ideas and telling the stories behind the work. So I spend a lot of time building out story and building out what I'm going to do or what I want to say in the work before I actually do it. I write, I do film, so I am a storyteller, and I want to try to bring that into my work as well. But I think just really taking the ideation to the canvas, and I think I paint best with my hands. I think I'm able to create the strongest emotional pull in my work on canvas when I'm using my hands over using a brush or using any type of other tool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And that's something that, those strengths, they only get stronger the more that you use them. I mean, it's like anything else.
Yeah.
Just, obviously, physical activity or fitness is the easiest or laziest example of that. But, and also on conversely, if you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Yeah.
Not that you'd forget how to tell stories, but if you just stop doing that for a period of time, you're not going to get better at it. It's probably,
Right.
You're not going to forget how to do it altogether, but in terms of, being sharp and being able to, construct things and connect the way that you want to. Yeah. So doing it consistently is really important. That's one thought that I had when I was, thinking about this too is, what am I naturally good at? What are my strengths, when it comes to the creative practice specifically? And I think that for me, it's just insatiable curiosity. I think that that's one area where just being, call it ADHD, call it what you want, but just always having, oh, what about this? What about that? And there are, I think, it's important to acknowledge too that just like every weakness has the flip side of the coin is there's a strength attached to it. Every strength has its own weakness or potential pitfalls, that may or may not be useful or consistent with the ultimate goal. And one of the things that I battle with a lot is just figuring out like, all right, this came to mind. All right, I got this, and there's that, and then there's always something. There's always a new sort of idea, and I'm curious and just continuing to pull that thread. But I think that's really where that last part, listening to your inner voice, is so important. And I think that it's important to, at least for me anyway, I think it's really important to continue to listen to that inner voice, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it's illogical, even when it may or may not be consistent with the plan of the moment. I don't know how many series I've got going on right now, but it's multiple, right?
Yeah.
And some of them are more consistent and intentional, and others are things that I'll be revisiting certainly over time. But I think that I depend on that. I rely on that curiosity to lead to the next strings of ideas.
Yeah.
And so even when they don't work out, even when they don't materialize, which is of course more often than when they do, I think that there's still something to be said for honoring that inner voice by listening, because to me, that's how that voice gets stronger.
Yeah.
Which becomes a skill in and of itself to be able to listen to it.
Yep.
I found there's a quote on this I wanted to share. Judith Victoria Douglas. It's hard. There we go. It's hard. talking sometimes. Hard. It's hard to learn to listen to your instincts. It's easier for some who have a natural ability to follow that little voice inside, but for others, it takes practice. And I think that's true. I think that's,
Absolutely.
learning to hear it, learning to listen, and then taking action on whatever that voice might be saying. But it's like anything else. It does take practice. And I wouldn't call myself an expert at anything, but I have got some experience now in listening to whatever that little voice says and saying, all right, well, why not? Why not experiment? Why not explore and expand on this and see where it leads? But it does take practice to hear it, to listen, and to not have that, because of course the rational mind is initially going to react and say, no, that's not we're doing this, or this is what we do, or this is what's on the list, this is what's on, at least mine does. And so it does take practice to not just listen, but to also sort of dismiss the conscious or rational or logical side of the mind and just lean into that still small voice, that little piece of inspiration.
Well, and that's become a huge part of my practice, and something that is learned. It's not something that happens overnight, but I spend as much time as I can listening today when I'm in the studio as I do creating. And I tell artists all the time, like, studio time doesn't have to be just painting. Studio time can be just sitting and listening and talking to the work. And I do this a lot. Just go into the studio and, I may be working on stuff in the office. I may be reading or writing or talking to other artists, but I'll go out in the studio and I'll just spend 30 minutes walking around and just looking at everything that I'm working on. I think right now I probably have 10 pieces in the works in the studio. And so I'll just walk out and just look at them and let them kind of speak to me and see what I'm doing, where I'm going, knowing what I want to say with the piece and how I want to say it, what's going to work. And some days I may not even put any paint down. I may just look. Sometimes I'll take pictures of them so that as I'm doing other things, I can hop on my phone and look at the picture and just kind of study the piece and listen. And sometimes I just set the chair in the middle of the studio and I just sit there, put some music on, put some Philip Glass on or some Art Blakey or Miles Davis, and just sit with music and just look at the work and listen. And our voice will speak to us in those moments, especially if you're immersed in your work and your practice on a regular basis. I know some of us don't have the opportunity to be fully immersed like we want to as a full-time job. We have other jobs and things, but taking that time aside to just really sit with your work, talk to it, listen to it, think through what you're doing, and really listen to yourself. And all the things that you're reading and all the art that you're looking at and all those things will start to help you really be informed with your own work when you're sitting and looking at it. And that's why I'm always encouraging, go look at art as much as you can. Not so that art tells you what to do, but the more you look at art and study it and have conversations with it and talk about things you like, you don't like, what are they doing? Oh, wow, I can see the brush strokes. I can see the fingerprints. Like, all of that informs you as an artist when you're sitting and thinking about your work. And now you start having those conversations with your work the same way you may have with the Marilyn Minter piece at a museum, or a Lee Krasner piece, or a Sam Francis piece. Talking about work I just saw last week in New Orleans. But as I sat there and looking at these pieces, only the second Alma Tama piece I've ever seen in a museum, which was fascinating to be able to sit in front of somebody from the Harlem Renaissance and just see their work and look at it and study it. And that helps me when I'm looking at my work, informed with depth and composition and things, and thinking through what I know about art in the outside world I can bring into my studio on the inside. And that all becomes part of my voice.
Yeah, that reminds me. I mean, I've got a few different mantras that I always repeat to myself. And one of them is just that repetition always wins. Like, it takes repetition, it takes time. You have to do it consistently.
Over,
you have to practice. Yeah. And I think a big part of that, I don't know if anybody listening can relate to this, but I'm a big, like, I move around a lot. I just do, like, sitting still. I mean, we're sitting here talking right now, like, this has a purpose, but this will be the longest that I sit still for sure, all day until I lay down at the end of the night. So one of the things that I've had to really discipline myself to do is to sit down and do that listening and journal. There's something about that for me who inherently has a difficult time focusing on anything in particular, but there's a lot of power in just sitting down. In fact, that's my It's my studio chair right there. Oftentimes with a dog in my lap, so I can't get up. Always with the phone somewhere else, not accessible. Ringer turned off, just me, and whatever journal I'm working on at the time, and just listening, writing, listening to myself, listening to that little voice. But I found that to be very helpful and something that I'm going to fill up at least 3. That's kind of the Julia Cameron artist way, filling up 3 pages, and it could be anything, right? I like to position my chair, somewhere where I can look at what I might be working on, and it might be about the work, it might be about whatever else, but there's power in that. And as far as a tactical tip, that's something that works really well, for me, not being somebody who, naturally is not super keen on just, sitting still.
Well, I have a question for you. So you're 2 years into studio practice?
Just over a year.
Solid years or shorter?
Just over a year.
Just over a year. Okay. So you're just over a year into it.
Little baby.
Your work has transformed massively from the start, really kind of flat images, spray paint and things like that, moving towards really full textural work with wood and all kinds of different materials. Well, what would you say in this last, year? What do you think has come the easiest to you? And do you think that you're fully exploring and expanding on what has come easy to you within the work itself with your strengths?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I can't remember when I sort of decided on this or adopted this as a philosophy, but it's that I know that I could. So it's back to curiosity, right? It's just like, what if this, and what, like every time this is, it's kind of nice that I couldn't be in the studio today.
Yeah.
Just point at shit. This is just a packing crate, and it's got, a bunch of plywood, basically just cheap plywood. It's got a bunch of, so I saw this, asked if I could have it. It was going to be in the trash, anyway. And now I'm playing with putting resin on it to try and get something that's naturally very, delicate to be durable. It may or may not work, right? But just, I know that I'm honoring that curiosity and that voice just by chasing it down. And I think that earlier on, I'm still so early, no matter how you choose to define it, but early, I had this idea that I was supposed to do something a lot, or at least a series, to really sort of drill it down and put a bow on it. And since then, the philosophy that I've adopted is just, I can always come back to any technique, to any style, to any, material, whatever it might be. Like, I'm not going to forget that I did that, because there's physical evidence of it existing, and I'm not going to forget how I got it. That is, by the way, one of, I think, the advantages of whether or not you share it, filming and taking photographs and just journaling, whatever it is, like somehow recording how you achieve different things, especially when you're experimenting as much as I am with different materials. But what was the original question? Am I answering it?
Yeah, just what do you think has come easiest to you in this process? Have you figured out kind of, oh, wow, these are some areas I'm really strong in, so I definitely need to explore and expand on them?
Yeah, got it. So to finish that thought, I think that what I'm naturally good at is shortening the distance between what if and let's see. You know what I mean? Like, I'm only in my head, and I'm there all day. I'm there all day. I don't know how other people's heads or brains operate, but I think that there's I think for most of us, right, especially if you're creative and you're in a creative practice of some kind, you've got a ton of ideas that come and go. And I think that if I have any natural strength that I lean into in that regard, it's just shortening the distance between what if and let's see. And I've accepted that just fairly recently. I've accepted that means that it's going to take me longer to complete bodies of work or series, because I'm going to have a lot going on, and I'm going to take a number of detours along the way. But I just have that belief that those little detours are going to make everything better and are going to push the work farther, faster, to your original question, as a result, as opposed to just, all right, I'm doing this right now, and I'll just kind of set that aside, for later. Here's a great example. So Leo and I were on a walk, that my dog, it was, so it's springtime here, and there's a lot of, water moving around. This little stream was just flowing, and it pulled a lot of the trash from an industrial area nearby. And there was a ton of just like really weathered, just plastic, right? But plastic when it's, and I'm sure there's a way to recreate this, manually, but there's something about like plastic that's been beat down, right? That's been in the stream, right? It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna at least capture this material. That's one nice thing about being a hoarder, which I think most artists are. It's just, well, if I collect this, I'm gonna see it again at some point.
Sometime.
Yeah. Somebody did a studio visit recently, and they saw I've got just like specific labels for all the different random things that I collect, and they're like, "What's in the pretty rags bin?" I'm like, oh, "There's pretty rags in there."
Pretty rags in there.
Like, what's in the awesome rust bin? I'm like, some awesome rust in there. But anyway, so just I didn't get any work done on what I intended to yesterday, but I did collect some really cool material that I'm going to do something with, and whether or not that works or not, it's going to lead me to the next thing. So that's I suppose if I had a strength that I continue to go back to, it would be that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and I think the key to all of this that we're talking about today, and one of the reasons why we chose this specific quote, is that number one, don't disregard what you're good at as an artist. The things that come easier to you are easier for you to start with and do, but at the end of the day, it takes time. And this quote is Marilyn Minter, I don't know, probably 40 years down the road, telling her younger self this advice.
Yeah.
So what is the one thing between the younger self and the Marilyn of today? Time.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the practice, the evolution, the exploring, the expanding on the things she was strong at all this time to really develop who she is as an artist and who is being shown. Who's in the Guggenheim? Who's in the MoMA? Who's in MFAH? Who's in San Francisco Modern? Like, it's the person that spent the time doing what they were good at and developing it. Just because it comes easy and you're good at it doesn't mean the work's going to be strong.
Yeah.
The way for the work to be strong is to continue to develop what you're good at and what comes easy to you over a period of time so that the work goes from immature and weak to strong and mature. And I think this is probably the hardest thing for all of us as artists. And I know you and I talked about this a year ago, right? The one question was like, well, is there a way to speed this up? When you'd say, Ty, any way I can jump a few ladder rungs here or speed this process up? And it's like, in art, no, it takes time to develop and time to really move through the motions of expanding on what you're good at and really, really growing within it. And that at the end of the day is the key. Like, the art world takes time. Your work takes time. You have to develop it.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up, because I think that, when I asked that question, it was in terms of progressing, my art career.
Yeah.
Which is a different thing than my artistic practice. Of course, they're related, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of unknown variables and things that I really, can't control when it comes to the progression of my art career. But in terms of my practice, we've got a lot more control over that.
Yep.
And I think it's important to keep that in mind. When you were just sharing that, I thought, and I wanted to ask you a follow-up question. Agree or disagree? If an artist is consistently lacking inspiration, and I use that word cautiously because, you and I both adhere to the Chuck Close, inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us go to work, right? But let's just use that word just because it works for now. If an artist is lacking inspiration consistently, they might be doing the wrong thing. Agree or disagree?
Disagree.
Okay.
Inspiration's a funny word because I'm not always inspired and I'm always working on art.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to surround myself with things that inspire on a regular basis. So I am a huge film person. I read a lot. I visit museums frequently and galleries. I listen to music daily across a broad spectrum of sound. There really isn't a genre that I don't enjoy. And I'm always really diving in deep in free time and moments and listening to random obscure music all over the place. And so I'm constantly keeping myself surrounded by things that inspire. And I think when inspiration comes, it's a miracle. It's insane what you can do in those moments. And I think what really helps is if we're constantly working, amidst not being inspired, when the inspiration comes,
Yeah.
you know, that's when magic happens, right? I think it's Rothko. That's when the dragons come, that fairy tale moment of you can just create. So no, I don't think you need inspiration to be doing the right thing. I think the right thing is your work, your gifts. I mean, if you're creating and painting and creating, a moment's going to hit where you're inspired, and it's just going to take all that you've been doing up until that point, and it's just going to expand on that in that moment, and it's going to grow in that moment. So I think, man, I'm sure there are plenty of great artists in history who had zero inspiration for a long time that created some of their best work because they were constantly working.
Yeah, that was a poorly phrased question on my part. You know, inspiration was was not the best word, nor was doing the wrong quote unquote thing, whatever that means. What I was, I think, attempting to get at was just the idea that it may not come easier when you're working within your, easier is not the right word, but it's the first one that came to mind, when you're working within your strengths, but it will flow more naturally, I think.
Yeah, you need to be you.
Yeah, and it's of course, and it's way easier to be you and do what is genuine and authentic, especially long term, right? I mean, back to your previous point about this being a very, you know, long game that we're playing. It's a hell lot easier to be that, you know, one of one that we all are, you know, for better, for worse, for better and for worse, than it is to try and force something that isn't, you know, naturally. That's kind of what I was.
I think if you're not being you, the truth will not be shown in the art.
Right.
If you're not being you, if you're trying to be somebody else in your work, it will show.
Yeah.
May not show right away, but eventually will show. Yeah. If you're literally trying to be Basquiat in your work, and I see a lot of it out there.
Really?
It doesn't do anything for me. Right? It, you know, I look at it and I go, that does nothing for me. Now, there are plenty of artists who have Basquiat influence in their work, and it does stuff for me, but they're not recreating the wheel. And I think that's probably what you were saying more than anything, is you need to be you in your work. And we're going to take influence. We're going to take all those things that we love and look at, and they're going to influence our work. But if we're trying to be something else that is not ourselves and not true, it will show in the work over time.
Yeah. So I've got one question for you as we wrap this up. You've been at this a lot longer than I have. So I'm just curious if you could maybe talk about, you know, what have you learned, or what personal observations have you made about exploring and expanding on your natural gifts? What advice would you give somebody if they're like, okay, cool, sounds great, what do I do?
Man, I mean, I think it takes a long time to figure out what those really are, because some of us artists have all these different things that we love. Film, writing, photography, painting, sculpting. I mean, there's all these different things that we really enjoy. And I think I've had this conversation with a lot of artists. Well, I love photography, but I love painting. Am I a painter or am I a photographer? I love to write. Am I a writer? You know, and I always say, I mean, you got to dabble in all of them to figure out what really feels like your thing. Doesn't mean you can't do all of them, but something needs to be a focus so you can get it out there.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean, like, I finished my first book a year ago, and I've been pitching it to literary agents after it was edited. And it took me a long time to do because I've been focused on painting. And I still wrote. It just took me a lot longer than it would, you know, produce the film, but wanting to do film. And I'd had to do that on the side of painting and things. And then there were times where the film production took away from studio time and painting as well. And it's like, you can still dabble in all these things that you love to do, but I think you have to dabble a little bit to figure out maybe where you're a little bit stronger and what you can use to kind of get that push out into the world for yourself. What do you really want to do? You can do them all. It's just going to be a lot harder.
Yeah.
I found it was easier to find one thing, really focus on it, painting, which I love more than anything, and do the other things on the side, aside from my studio time. But I think it's just growing up. At the end of the day, the older you get, the more wisdom you have, and you kind of figure out, ooh, this is where I'm really strong. I'm going to put most of my eggs in this basket, and I may dabble in these other things on the side.
And that dabbling is never, it definitely does. Yeah. And that dabbling is never wasted, right?
No, never.
You know, even when it feels like it was a dead end, like it didn't go anywhere, you know, whatever it might be. And I mean, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about how, from the way that you title your work to the way that you talk and, you know, talk about, like, it's obvious that you've spent time, you know, telling stories, and you found a way to, you know, even if the book doesn't go anywhere or you never become a, you know, best-selling author, the time that you've spent doing that makes you a better artist, right? The time you spend with film makes you a better, whatever you want to call yourself, right? So I think it's important to, just continue to encourage ourselves and others to chase down those curiosities, continue to dabble and try different things, except that it may delay the main thing, if there even is a main thing, but we just never know, where those little threads may lead, and back to that faith of following that little voice inside, I think is really important. So that feels like a good place to end, unless you have something else.
Yeah. And with Marilyn, her dabbling in all these different things has become her art: photography, painting, film, right? The human figure, the facial gestures and things of feminism, and the way that the world treats women in an eroticized fashion and stuff. And she's been able to bring this to short films, to movement, to all the things within her work. It's all these little ideas and things that she probably loves and has dabbled in that have really formed a cohesive practice. And so, that answers everything that you just said too.
That answers every question that one could have about this.
Ever.
Just boom.
Ever. Done.
Well, it's been a good podcast. I guess that's it.
Yeah.
We answered all of it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. All right. I think that's it. Unless you got anything else.
Yep. If you have any comments or don't like us or disagree with us or want to add anything, send us some Instagram messages. We'd love to talk about it.
Especially if you don't like us, because there are a lot of reasons not to like us.
All right. We'll see you guys in a week or 2 weeks or sometime.
Yeah, another time than this. Absolutely.
Another time.
Over and out.